I finally have a moment to batch record all of these, so we will finally be in one outfit. Because I'm pretty sure day 2's shirt is going to give at least one person an aneurysm. Today we are continuing my paint marker marathon, where I'm going through 12 different brands of paint markers to find out who really is the king of... What's an idiom? I was gonna say the king of the crop, and I know that's not right. It's king of the hill and the cream of the crop. King of the crop. Let's go with it. And today we're going to be doing the brand that started my search for paint markers, Liquitex. Liquitex used to be like one of the top brands that I grabbed for, particularly for their acrylic ink series. I used to use that as like my #1 go-to art medium. I can't exactly do that anymore. One, I don't exactly have the patience I used to. I don't know what happened. But I also have 2 cats who have decided that wherever my hands are is exactly where they've been destined to be. I'd rather not have to talk to my landlord about why there's giant red stains underneath my desk. I promise it's just ink. I don't know when Liquitex released these markers. I saw when I went searching for them on their website that the page was like either created or last updated in 2013. If they are a recent release, marketing hasn't really, like, I haven't heard about them through usual marketing tactics, or if they were released years and years ago, why haven't I heard about them? That will be the point of today's video. Every single one of these markers is being tested on 3 criteria: the packaging, the swatching, and the drawing. Without further ado, why don't we get into the packaging? So if you're familiar with Liquitex, I feel like they have a pretty stable brand image. For example, here is the Liquitex acrylic inks, and you can kind of see from on the box here, they're pretty much the exact same. However, I feel like this packaging works on the acrylic inks because you can see just how much you have left, whereas on the paint markers, you can see a tiny little sliver at the top and a tiny little sliver at the bottom, and that's it. I am a little disappointed in that. Almost every other check mark of mine is met, and I think it's really interesting that they went and listed the pigments. They have the opacity, which I'm very excited to test, and the light fastness, which is not a thing that I usually see listed on paint markers. They're a chisel nib. This is the first chisel nib of the bunch, and they have their color name. The color number is hidden down here in the barcode, like it is on some of their more recent packaging. This color, Brilliant Purple, is number 590. It's like slightly more bolded, and I only found that out after spinning this marker around like 9 times while looking at their website and finally managing to catch that. The 2 negatives I have for this marker: 1, can't really see how much ink is left, and 2, the cap. This might be a little nitpicky, but I'm a little particular about how I organize my paint markers, and when I organize them to all have their cap facing out for easy access, it's a little hard to tell which brand this is. The color cap is more or less how I pick the color. You can see it from the back end. It feels wrong to put this marker face first into my stack. It's like the tiniest gripe in the world, so I'll only take a half point off for it, but it's still very important to me. Whereas Montana's did it right. They still have a clear cap, but they still have this little bit that shows you what color you're grabbing for, even if the packaging does not. Going back over it, I do really like that they have their brand name, the color name. They have a color number, though it's hidden a little bit. I really like that they include opacity and light fastness and the pigment, but I wish that they had a colored cap, and I wish that they showed me how much ink was left. Like, just even a little gap between the edges of the sticker would be nice. So, like the Montana markers, these are going to get a 3.5 in the packaging department. Next is the swatching. Based on the swatching on the box, I just realized how translucent that is. The most opaque marker on the box is the blue, so I'm gonna use the blue. And I wanna use the purple because I think this is the darkest one in the set. All of these, except for the yellow, really feel like they are at the same value. Let's hope these are different enough. So this one is light blue permanent. And then this is brilliant purple. With these being chisel nibs, the dot section is really going to be more of a dash section. Let's see if I can get dots. Okay, I can get an okay dot from these. They're a little inconsistent, but could be worse. So here is the fine line versus the thick line. Oh, what the heck? And then the thin line versus the thick. These aren't really like, it's kind of hard to press them all the way down against the paper to get a good start line. The flat of the chisel nib isn't the most even. So next is the layer test. So here's layer number 1. Same for the purple, which I feel like the opacity on the box isn't lying. This feels a little bit more like using a highlighter than a paint marker. That's really weird. So right off the bat, there's this weird reflectivity to these markers. Time for layer 2 though. Let's hope the purple does something. Here's to show that this is still translucent in one layer, and here's the double layer crossover. It got even shinier on the second one. That's worrisome. The next test is the gesso test. It's a little bit rougher compared to the normal paper. Ooh. The purple one doesn't deal as well with the rougher texture of the gesso. With them being shiny, I would assume they're more plasticky. Let's see whether or not that translates to them being better in the varnish department. We'll just do one layer for this. Let's go ahead and also go in with the light and dark swatch. Okay, the opacity was a little better right there, but I had to pump out a little bit more paint. I also worry it's going to be pretty shiny. The shininess really makes it hard to tell when it's dry, because usually I wait for it to go from being shiny to matte. That's weird. The varnish I will be using is the Liquitex High Gloss Varnish, because I don't currently have anything matte in my arsenal. I like to go back and forth over my paints a good few times to make sure I don't have any spots that are mounded up and would dry as a lump. Actually, I'm not really even getting very much pulled up from the paintbrush. Okay, I think this is our first pen that doesn't fail the varnish test. Now time for the opacity test. Oh, that's not great opacity. You can still very much see the background color, and it really tarnishes how light that blue is. And you can see all these streaks. Ooh, that's weird. It's like pulling up the marker as it lays down. Oh boy, time to see the pencil test. We'll just put a scribble down about how hard I probably should sketch, though let's be real here, I sketch a lot harder than this. Blue first. Yeah, I can see the pencil and the color ace through both. I can see the pencil a little bit through this section in person, but 2 layers would cover that probably. Let's see about... Okay. So a second layer will cover over the pencil. I have a feeling I will have to worry about the yellow though. Probably have a purple dark enough to go over this purple, but we'll use this Rose Art Teal for the blue. Oh. I really like adding texture and detail with colored pencil. This does not like colored pencil. I'm trying to gradient it out, but I'm just getting like weird blotchy streaks. This is how I'd like it to look. Rather disappointing. Maybe it's just the blue. Better, but I still feel like it's weirdly smeary wherever I'm trying to layer it harder. Yeah, I'm gonna have to take off like a half point for this. That opacity is just really bad. It sucks that it's the first one to actually pass the varnish test, but this is the opacity we're working with, and it gives me essentially a gloss sheen without a varnish. Plus the colored pencil is kind of atrocious. For the swatching, I'm gonna also subtract 1 for the nib, just because these brand new pens shouldn't look like this. I think the opacity and the nib shape, while I don't mind chisel nibs, and in some situations I actually kind of prefer them, this isn't great, and I'm really bummed that the color pencils don't layer over it well. So in the swatching department, Liquitex markers are going to get a 2.5. I'm seeing a pattern here that I'm not quite excited for, so here's hoping they'll redeem themselves a little bit. Every brand in this series was randomly matched up with 1 illustration, and those illustrations were also randomly generated. Today's illustration is a seal girl who has space buns and an astronaut's helmet wearing a kigurumi. And she didn't have a hand item, so I just decided to put her hands out in front of her, and I interpreted the space buns as being made out of like a headscarf. Now, for the coloring of this piece, I wanted the kigurumi to kind of be like her spacesuit, and the only color that screamed spacesuit out of all of these was the orange. Instantly, I was a little concerned about the opacity. On the first layer, I could see every little bit of pencil line through, and I didn't erase as well as I should have. And honestly, in the final piece, you're gonna be able to see the pencil lines, which is really frustrating because going into this series, this was my top illustration. These pens claim they're opaque. They are definitely not. I shook these as hard as I could every time I used them. I am not surprised the yellow was kind of lacking in opacity. They tend to, but there are some areas in the purple where I can still kind of see the pencil line. There are some areas in the pink, and that's very frustrating. And especially with layering over some areas, these pens are not the best at covering over even other paint marker. I had some trouble deciding how exactly I wanted to balance out these markers because I thought that the purple would be the darkest marker in this series, but I think the darkest marker is actually the magenta / pink, but it didn't make sense for me to use the purple as the main body of the headscarf and then use the pink as the shadows. So I wish that the colors of the caps would actually reflect the colors, because if you look over at that hot pink and you look over at the pink on the paper, it's not the same. I also noticed if you let a bubble form as they're drying, these markers actually maintain the bubble. And it was disturbing. Like I've done for every marker in the series, everybody is going to be getting a line art done in Posca pens just to give everyone a fair fighting chance for me to actually like the piece. I've tried lineless art in the past. I just don't think for some of these markers that it would end up going okay. And this is one of those few markers. Halfway through the line art, I found that these markers were actually so sticky, I could press my fingers into the paper and it would stick to my hand and rise up a few inches before dropping down. I promise my thumb is not behind the image. Obviously, this lovely little astronaut had to be in space, so I experimented with trying some new star shapes behind her. I don't usually do a connected 4-point star like I do in this. I'm still not 100% sure about how they look in comparison to my usual just straight line stars, but I think they add some pizzazz to the space. And of course, my tape rips didn't go quite well on this one. But here you can see the sheen that this has, and there are some areas of this where you can very clearly see the pencil lines. I absolutely love how this art piece ended up turning out, but that opacity is kind of atrocious. You can still see pencil lines right through here, and here. Basically anywhere there's orange, the opacity completely failed. And that's with multiple layers. And then the sheen is also incredibly disappointing. And why is it sticky? It shouldn't be sticky while I am drawing. While this is an absolutely adorable piece, and the points do not reflect my opinions of the pieces that I create during this, I think I'm gonna have to give Liquitex a 1 in the drawing section. Maybe, yeah. So out of a 15 total, they have a 7. So here is the current lineup as far as the brand points go. Poscas are currently at number 1 with 12 points, Molito's at 11.5, Liquitex at 7, and Montana's at the lowest at 6.5. For all of the points regarding those, I have a playlist running. I will put it at the end of this video. There are more markers to come, so please join me tomorrow for the next brand review.